And I always try to not show the organizers how many slides I have. So in order to actually keep track, I'm also going to use a timer. And if you start to look very angry, I can also use that as a clue, because I guess you're all hungry. So I come from the Gapminder Foundation, and we're a very small non-profit based in Stockholm in Sweden. And we try to do educational material that is free for anyone to use and to promote a fact-based worldview that everyone can understand. And the key here is that everyone can understand. Because if we do materials or information that people do not understand, it's a little bit worthless, right? So the reason, to make the world understandable, we need to use numbers. And now we actually have a lot of numbers from a lot of different sectors from all over the world. So we can actually finally succeed in that. But in this format, very few people will actually be attracted and listen. So we have spent many years trying to make data animating statistics. We've made like documentaries, and we made TED Talks, and we also improved the search at Google so that when you search for public data indicators, you should immediately get some visual results. But unfortunately, we came to Google to do this, and we were so happy thinking, now we can finally succeed. We can get all this data come together, and all these searches for public statistics that doesn't result in a good search or like result. Now we can finally solve that. And we went through all the search logs, trying to see what of the big indicators within the like development field people were actually searching for. But that was a bit depressing, because what people were searching for was almost only life expectancy, which is one of the indicators we like that people look at and think about, but in relation to the word cat. So they were basically wondering how old their cats would be. I don't know if they wanted to get rid of the cat or if they wanted it to live long, but it was a bit disappointing, I have to say. So, so we finally decided that it will probably not work to help people to get a worldview by just searching, because they will only find the result of their exact question. That will never form a worldview that is somewhat data-driven. So we have written this book, Factfulness, and it starts with a set of questions that I also asked you. And about 140, the last time I checked, had actually answered this poll, the same as the book starts with. And I'm going to actually annoy you with the results of a few of them. So one of the questions is that the global climate experts believe that over the next 100 years, the average temperature will get warmer, stay the same, or get colder. Get warmer is sort of the correct answer here. And we asked these questions in 14 countries in representative samples, and this is the results. And in Belgium, 87% got this right, and that is pretty impressive, isn't it? Only 13% got it wrong. So I would say, in some sense, the public communication has actually worked pretty well here. So we can actually start doing things now, because people know that there is something going on, at least. So here, now we're here. So what about you then? Do you feel a bit frightened, or do you think you managed as well? You're actually managed very well. So 98% of you actually got this right. So this is nice. But now you have to remember, we use this question actually more or less as a test question that we get rid of, because most people get this right. So we don't pay that much attention to this one. But when we look at different things, we get completely different results. In the last 20 years, the proportion of people living in extreme poverty worldwide has halved, stayed the same, or doubled. I mean, you can see it's rough, and it's very big variation between the answering alternatives. And halved is the correct one. Looking at the results, it's not the same anymore, right? So Norway and Sweden is on top. And we were actually asking the follow-up question to the Swedes, how come did you answer correctly on this one? And they all said Hans Rosling. So, I mean, some effect it actually had, but it's only 25%, so we still have a long way to go. And if we look at Belgium, it's not very impressive, I would say. And it actually is an important measure, because if you see that the general public thinks that the poverty is either the same or has doubled, then whatever you are communicating will have a hard time reaching their brains in a decent way, or in a decent, no, decent it will probably be, but in a smart, a way they can act on. Because one of the biggest problem is that people are ignorant about their own ignorance. So we use these questions just so that we can see that we're not achieving as well as we would probably hope we would. So here, you're still much, much better than everyone else, but you're not in the top anymore. But you're still, you're overachieving compared to the others. We can look at this one. How many of the world's one-year-old children today have been vaccinated against some disease? It's a very wide and broad question, but it at least give you an idea. Is it about 20, 50, or 80%? And 80 would be the correct one. The results are like this. Sweden, atop again. Belgium, not as on top, but still not in the bottom at least. But here we should imagine if the people had not read the question at all, just picking A, B, or C without knowing what the question was about, just like a monkey would, the result would have been 33%, right? Because there are 3 alternatives, and this is what is the big problem. This is not like the people are just lack of knowledge and just guessing. It is when people sit down and start analyzing to find the proper result, they think of the world as a place that is actually much worse than it actually is, we think we see in these numbers. So what about you here? You are better than the chimps. That is amazing. Congratulations on that. But you still could maybe go a bit further. So we have, I will comfort you. Remember your result, 42%, because we have been in some prominent audiences, and we have actually captured some results there. So now you can be comforted. World Health Summit. You could potentially think that they might know something about the global vaccination. And some did. Davos, this was a few years back, so if you were there the last 2 years, it's not your results. So 18%. And then we have a meeting in Lindau for medical Nobel laureates and some highly achieving scientists. And then we saved the best one for last. One of the 5 largest banks, and they were the smart ones, so they actually had to sign an NDA before doing this. So therefore, we say it's one of the 5 big, and this is their result. And here, the reason we show this is just imagining these are the people who are actually investing in the future, right, in different ways. The smart, bright, high achiever, they have high education, they are brilliant in their own fields, but when it comes to factual knowledge about the world around us, we very seldom take this broad perspective, and they couldn't know it by heart, but when we are guessing, we go for the bad ones all the time, and it's pretty frustrating. So looking at the results, how people were achieving in these 14 countries where we were measuring, 15% got 0 correct answers. And just imagining, you have 12 ABC questions and you score 0. It's pretty impressive in its own way. And this is the other results. Remember that this is where you would end up if you hadn't read the questions at all, just picking randomly. So it's not a very positive result, I would say. One person got 11, that was a Swede, we don't know who, and no one got 12. So 10% was actually achieving something better than a chimp. And it's a bit sad in a knowledge society, I think, actually. I don't know what you think, but I think that. So now we come to your results. No pressure. So you had a few actually sort of approaching the chimp level. You had some at the chimp level, but you actually had a few on the other side too. And one person, I don't know who, but actually got it all correct. So that is very impressive. It's not every day that happens. Of the 12,000 we tested in the other poll, no one did. So This is at least promising. So you, with the all correct ones, you can maybe talk some with the others during lunch. So 54% got better results in the CHIMPs. I mean, it's much, much better. So if we look, this is a test that YouGov was asking to the general public in different countries. Do you think the world is getting better or worse? And it's a very weird question, because what is getting better or worse? But I mean, what they immediately thought of. 4% thought it was getting better in Germany, 4 in UK, and 3 in France. So just imagining, if that is how we see the world, of course we're going to guess wrongly. So in the book Factfulness, we do have 32 charts of things actually becoming better, just to remind people that even though we have a lot of problems, a lot of things being in a bad shape that we need to fix, still there is a lot of things that have actually achieved very good results over the long time run. So just to remind you, I think it's a pretty good thing that legal slavery is going down. Deaths from disasters, lead in gasoline is almost gone. Fewer children are dying before their fifth birthday, and it's less likely to die in plane crashes. Pretty good things, all of them. We have more movies to choose from as well. That's also a pretty nice thing. And we have more kids being immunized, at least if you compare to 1980. Now it is flattening, which is disturbing. But if you compare to 1980s, at least, you have had a good result. We have more music to choose from, and a bigger portion of the world is being protected. Some people are getting irritated when I show this and say, yeah, but it's only the bad nature that is being protected. But even so, if that is the case, we're still having a bigger portion that we're actually somewhat taking care of. So if we're looking at the trends in the world, we also have to remember here's the world population back in year 1800, and you can see the extreme poverty rate here. 86% of the world population were living below that. The colors are due to the regions you can see on the map. And if we just scroll this very, very fast, we can see over time how population is increasing, of course. Here in the 80s, we have the divided world between the poor and the rich, you could say. You could see the humps. And coming here now, you have the biggest portion of the world population actually moving out and actually moving further there. That doesn't mean that the problems are gone, but we have to remember those trends too. So, but to understand the world, we look out the window and not much is happening. So of course we cannot see those global slow trends by just looking out the window. So we look at the TV and we see disasters and wars and refugees and diseases and paradises and cute animals and exotic cultures, and we try to shape a worldview out of that. And that is of course a bit problematic, because what we see in the news are all the extraordinary events that happens. And even though we know that, our brains have a hard time actually remembering that over the times. So instead, think of the world as a street where you have the poorest to the left, the richest to the right, and everyone else somewhere in between. These are the 7 billion people of the world. And we have been asking the Swedes where they think they belong, and usually they answer here. So I mean, look out the window, not much is happening. You look at the news, you see all the extraordinary weird things happening, and you truly believe you are in the middle of the world income distribution. Yeah, then it is a bit tricky to actually get it right. Because just by living in Sweden, you're most likely in the richest billion, right? So we created a tool that we call Dollar Street that we think actually makes a difference here. So we have visited families all over the world on different income levels, and we sort the families not by where they are from, but of their income levels. So we have poorer to the left, richer to the right, and we've been to a lot of different families. So we can actually see what everyday life looks like to compensate for the dramatic imagery in the media. So we can go here and we can take beds, for instance. We click beds, and we can immediately see the difference of beds in everyday houses. So remembering the Swedes thought they were in the middle, then we can actually filter like this to watch beds in the middle of the world income distribution. And the Swedish kids and Swedish adults would not really recognize their bedroom here. We can slide it down. They wouldn't recognize it here either. But if we slide it up, it starts to look like a typical Swedish bedroom, even though these bedrooms are in France, India, US, China, and so forth. Because this is how we need to compensate, I think. We can do toilets, which is my favorite. I look at the watch now and then. So I am in a bit of a trouble, but I'm not pretending not to notice yet. But here you can see, in this picture, we see white water flushing toilets. Seems like people have a preference for that in all these different places. But we have to remember, this is not the representative image of all toilets. We have to slide out to see a more representative image. And what we see then is actually what toilets actually looks like. And I think we need these everyday imagery to compensate, to see what life is like for people on a daily basis. So let's go back. Not everything can be captured as photos, but a lot can. We also do videos. So now we look at toothbrushing. We're starting in the richer end, and then we move slowly, slowly downwards to the poorer end of the street and see people in all these different places are brushing their teeth with plastic toothbrush and toothpaste in a similar manner. Some are very serious, but otherwise they are doing the same thing, because it's a common thing all of us do on a daily basis in one way or another. And when we come down to the poorest end, people can no longer afford the plastic toothbrush, so they will solve it elsewhere, so in other ways. So therefore, in Dollar Street, we tag this image not only as a wall, but also as toothpaste, because that is what we need to keep the proportions to understand. So now I'm actually going to use the skip button here so that we can actually move along a little bit. And you're missing out on the best part, of course, just so you know. So what we do then, let's go here. What we do then in the Dollar Street is that we can go here. The images, when you see the everyday lives, do not look like the images you see in the media, which is a pretty good thing. And sometimes people say, yeah, but why don't you just Google? You know, there are loads and loads of images out at Google. You can just grab those. Yes. So toilet, bed, and stove, for instance. Of course, these images are not lying, but they are not giving us a representative image. They are showing what the richest 10% either have or aspire to get next. So to understand the world, we need to think of it as 4 levels. And here's the 7 billion people again. So we use the street and place the people in these different income groups. And to understand that better, we can look at transportation. Level 1, which is basically extreme poverty, we have 1 billion people there. People have to more or less walk if they are getting somewhere. You can say level 2, bike, level 3, motorcycle, level 4, access to a car in one way or another. And we also need to know where people live. So here we have the same 7 billions, 1 billion in Americas, 1 in Europe, 1 in Africa, and 4 in Asia. So to remember the distribution of the world income, we need these very basic frameworks. And we can think of the world as a PIN code, 1114. That's an easy way to remember that we basically have most people in Asia. And in the future, there will be more people. I'm going the wrong way. There will be more people in Asia, and there will be more people in Africa, according to the UN's population calculations. So it will look something like this. And if we divide the world into the classical West, where we happen to be, in year 2100, I think we have to be a bit humble and realize that if we are 8% of the world population, it will be pretty hard to get the rest to actually listen to our advice unless we're polite. So this is where it's going to happen, right? So these guys, nowadays, the CEOs of Microsoft and Google, both are born, raised, and educated in India. And now they are heading these global corporations. And I think that is pretty interesting to remember for the future. And if we break down the population for the future, we can see that the majority are actually living on level 2, which is basically the bike level. And moving into the future, if we do project, which we have done internally, so of course this is not the world's most perfect projections, but if everything keeps as of today, This is what it would look like roughly in 2040, where we have the biggest population will actually be on level 3 and approaching level 4, and we will have few people still left in extreme poverty on level 1, because it's pretty hard to get them out, but this is what we think, that the majority will actually slide upwards. And we will have a lot of Satya and Sundars up here. So how can we beat the chimp? Now I have 28 seconds, and I'm going to spend it very fast. We need facts and frameworks. Otherwise, we're doomed when we try to understand the world. And we cannot learn everything by heart, because the world is changing and our minds are limited, because we do have other hobbies too. Hans never understood that, but that is why we actually have developed some thinking habits that we think actually could do some difference. So we call it the rules of thumb. And one of them, basically how we can control our dramatic instincts. We have the gap instincts, where we think, well, as soon as we hear about huge differences, we should always locate the majority and think about that. We hear about negativity, trends, something becoming worse, but we should always remember that good things are seldom mentioned. Yesterday, all trains were on time again, we're never here, right? When we see a trend, we think it's going to continue. Our brains fills it in, but many lines bend. It's good enough as a clue to remember. We hear stories driven by fear, but we need to remember to calculate risks. We hear single numbers, huge problems, but we need to remember to compare and divide. In 2016, 4,489,000 infants died globally. Horrible number. 2015, worse. 1950, much worse. So we need to remember that something can be bad and still become better at the same time. We also need to be careful with groupings. It's very easy that we think this is a homogeneous group, which it's of course not. They went to these horrible, dangerous boats to come to the Europe, and a few of them ended up at Gran Canaria on a nudist beach. So I'm just interested to know their impression of Europe. Did people warn them before that you're risking your life to spend the future together with nude pink men with hats, right? And then we have the destiny instinct, that we tend to think that cultures will stay the same way as they are today. It will always be like this, but we have to remember that most are actually changing. It's slow, but it is changing. And we tend to be very narrow-minded and keep our mindset. And we blame all the time, but that is pretty stupid, because we stop thinking, and we want to do urgent stuff, immediate actions, big actions, but we need to remember that we can usually take one step at a time. So maybe when it comes to the news, maybe we should have a warning sign like we have on the cigarettes, so that we remember that it's not the news lying to us, but our brains cannot handle it, and we can't remember that we only hear about the extremes, right? So if you do the test again, do it on our website. If you go to our website, gapminder.org, scroll down under the video. There is a button where it says, do the test. Click there. When you score correct, you can do it several times. You will get this diploma sent to your inbox with your name on it very nicely. So we have done this kind of certificate testing with the news industry in Sweden, schools, and this is what I need to stop with saying. This is my final point. This place I heard about, I mean, we know what it is, but we heard that they are a social entrepreneurship hub in Sweden. And they have actually started, when they are hiring people, not only are they looking at the CV, but they do need to send the diploma that they have passed the Gapminder test, which I think is pretty decent, because then you know that they at least know something more than a chimp about the global world around them, which I think is a pretty decent standard for a workplace of highly educated and smart people. So just giving you some ideas. And if you want to talk more, or you can always send an email, find our gapminder.org, or you can follow us at Facebook, basically. So thank you. And now I've actually interrupted 3.5 minutes of your lunch. I'm sorry for that, but thank you.